Hey guys, it's Joshua Klein here, your host of the Draft Beard podcast. And tonight we are going to be looking at a recap of round one of last night's NFL draft. What an evening it was. Please like and subscribe to this channel so you guys can get more up-to-date information on all things the NFL draft and the NFL. And with that, let's get right down to it. So last night it was an offensive-heavy draft as the first 14 picks were all offensive players, which is an NFL record. And because of that, two franchises, the Philadelphia Eagles and the Detroit Lions, made out like bandits. It does seem like this every year that Howie Roseman just knows how to work the draft, and he ends up with phenomenal players. Last year, Jalen Carter and Smith out of Georgia. This year, sits at 22, doesn't trade up like all the speculation had him trading up, and he still gets Quinyon Mitchell, arguably the number one corner in the draft. He was number one on my board, narrowly over some other guys like Cooper DeJean and Terrion Arnold. Sits there, gets the corner he wants. Jacksonville on the next pick, after trading down with the Vikings, which we'll get to later, they take a wide receiver even though they had a corner need, and the Dallas Cowboys were on the clock. They take that pretty much all the way down, and next thing you know, the Detroit Lions, the hometown team, for this year's NFL draft, they trade into number 24. And who did they pick? Terrion Arnold, cornerback out of Alabama. Both of those franchises, year after year, are just masterful at working the draft, and they end up with top-notch players. Some will argue that Arnold is a top 10 player. There are a few draft publications or pundits who had him in the top 10. I think Daniel Jeremiah had him at number 9. So the Detroit Lions get a top 10 pick at 24, or top 10 player. Same thing, some publications that Quinyon Mitchell in that top 10 range. So both franchises fill a need of the Eagles. It was a desperate need really for them. They really had some struggles at corners. The Lions filled a lot of their needs in free agency at corner. Unfortunately, the Cam Sutton situation made that a little bit more of a need, and we thought we kind of had that solidified. But both of them get top-notch draft prospects at cornerback who both can play in press coverage, and they both have the ability to be ball hawking and maybe both be number one corners. So Brad Holmes and Howie Roseman make out like bandits in round one of the NFL draft. Just keeps happening year after year, and as a Lions fan, I just hate to see it. All right, next up, I told you that this draft was going to be quarterback offensive heavy, right? We move into the Chicago Bears and the Minnesota Vikings, both taking quarterbacks. And if you look at what the Vikings have done, and especially the Chicago Bears and what they have done this offseason and in the last couple drafts, I contend that the NFC North in the next few years, maybe even as early as this year, will be the toughest division in football. The Lions have gotten to themselves where they got to the NFC Championship game. Jordan Love looked pretty good at the end of the last year, and the Packers were pretty close to being in the NFC Championship game. Now you got the Chicago Bears, who had a really good offseason. Maybe they did overpay a little bit for Montez Sweat last year at the trade deadline, but they picked up Keenan Allen. They already had DJ Moore in the deal they got last year, which they lucked into Carolina stinking and giving Bryce Young absolutely no help, which then allowed the Chicago Bears to pick number one overall, pick Caleb Williams. I'm not as high on Caleb as a lot of other people. I did not have him number one on my board. Still had him in the top 5. He has tremendous upside. I still think there's some flaws in his game that a lot of people just don't want to talk about. But then you come down to number 9, and they pick up Rome Odunze. Seriously. Now you have Odunze, Allen, and DJ Moore as your receivers. You can put Allen in the slot. You can put Moore on the outside or in the slot. And you can put Odunze as an X receiver on the outside. And then they have a couple good tight ends there. Chicago's offense is definitely set up to give Caleb Williams everything that he can do to succeed as early as possible. Then you flip over to Minnesota. On offense, they have got some weapons. We all know about them. The running game, they're hoping that getting Aaron Jones from the Packers will help improve that running game. But J.J. McCarthy goes to probably the best surrounding offense for any rookie quarterback. So McCarthy and Williams set up to succeed right from year one. That division's going to be tough. You're going to have 4 teams who are going to be going at it head-to-head for the next few years. So look forward to great matchups. Hopefully, my Lions come out on top. But, man, that division is going to be fun to watch. The NFL or the NFC North is going to be just an absolute dogfight. Maybe we'll be back to the days of the black and blue division. just with a little bit more offense. So with all that offense that we had, told you the tackle class or the offensive guard class this year was absolutely loaded. And if you count them all as tackles, 9 went in the first round. That's right, 9. Now I had 2 of them that I had over at the guard position. That was Jordan Morgan and Graham Barton. Everybody else, pretty much every publication, sees them as their primary position as being tackle. You could say Torrey Fontenot kind of also maybe his best position might end up being guard. But 9 offensive tackles go in the first round. 6 wide receivers go in the first round. And man, what an offensive draft. That allowed a lot of the defensive players to kind of slide down the draft board. You had Joe Alt going to the I still want to call them the San Diego Chargers. It's always going to be the San Diego Chargers to me, but the Los Angeles Chargers and Jim Harbaugh. That gives them phenomenal bookends on the outside, right tackle, left tackle, wherever you want to play them with Alt and Slater. That was a great pick. The Saints, they absolutely had to have a tackle. They got one in Fuaga. I like the Jets, kind of going out of the box with their traditional bigger guys who are, muscular, big, hulky, kind of a little bit more run blocking in Fashanu. I think that was actually a good pick for them. They brought in some free agents, so Fashanu doesn't have to come in right away. He is going to play at some point. I just kind of see that happening. But that was a good pick by the Jets. And Amarius Mims going to the Bengals, he doesn't have to play right away. They do have some other guys there. I'm not as high in Amarius Mims, but the tremendous upside with Amarius. And then you come down the draft board, obviously Jordan Morgan getting drafted above Graham Barton. That one was a little surprising to me. I obviously was much lower on Jordan Morgan than the consensus was. I had Jordan Morgan in almost year 40 on my draft board. Graham Barton, if I look at my draft board, I have him right near the top 9. I did have him at 10. Top 10. So the Packers take Jordan Morgan over Graham Barton. That one to me was a little puzzling. I didn't get that one. Maybe did they panic a little bit if they were looking for a corner and then Mitchell and Arnold went, but even still, it's Cooper DeJean was sitting right there for them. I know they needed an offensive lineman. I was just really surprised by the Jordan Morgan pick ahead of Graham Barton by 1 pick as Barton goes to Tampa Bay. They make out like bandits. And then Tyler Guyton goes to Dallas. Little confusing as well. Dallas needs help a little bit more immediate. Guyton is not ready to be an every down player. He's not ready for that starting role yet. He's going to need time to develop. If you go back and you watch my tackles video, I had 3 tackles there that I thought were grouped together that were a little raw, need time to develop. And Sumi Atia, Guyton, and Amarius Mims. So that pick kind of baffled me if I were Dallas. And, I know they got an extra 3rd round pick from the Lions to move back those 5 spots. But if I were them, they were going to get much better value by staying and taking Graham Barton, who a lot of people had in the top 15 in this draft. So I had him in the top 10. Man, I just don't get that pick. I just don't. And from Dallas's point of view, hey, Jerry, hopefully it works out for you. Or then again, maybe not. And then the Baltimore Ravens, they kind of come out on the short end of the stick here. They needed some offensive line help at the tackle position. And of the premier guys that were on the board, they missed out. Graham Barton was really that last one. I won't beat the dead horse, Morgan and Guyton there. But if you look at the tackle class now you're looking at, developmental guy in Sumi Atia. So he's going to be down the road. I don't know if Rosengarten is the Ravens type of offensive lineman. You got Patrick Paul and Coleman and Fisher. So these guys are now graded in the 3rd round. So they're definitely day 2 picks, kind of mid-day 2 picks. That's where I see them at. So the Ravens kind of missed out there, and they ended up drafting Nate Wiggins, also not too high on. I just don't buy into the size. He's aggressive. Given his thin frame, I know he's tall, yet I just don't buy it. And the Ravens are great, right? Who might have questioned the Baltimore Ravens and their drafting cachet? I'm not a fan of Nate Wiggins. The injury concerns get me. Yeah, he has the speed, and he could turn into being just an absolute shutdown corner. But he doesn't tackle very well. Maybe they can coach him up, teach him that. But I just see too much of an injury risk with Nate Wiggins. So Baltimore, in my opinion, they kind of got left a little bit in the dust there with not being able to fill their tackle need. They did the polar opposite of the Brad Holmes style, seeing the board and working the board. I rather preferred, if you're a Ravens fan, to move up the board to get that last higher end offensive tackle. They didn't. They stayed put. They obviously have a different view on Nate Wiggins. So the receivers in this draft, obviously the top three win. The top three is how you expect it with Marvin Harrison, Neighbors, and Odunze. The only really critique I had is the Giants. I just think with what they have already on their roster, I would have rather seen them get Odunze over Neighbors. Neighbors is going to excel the best at the NFL in the slot. That doesn't mean he can't play on the outside, but I think his best position is going to be in the slot, and the Giants already have about 800 of those. So it's just a minor critique. I mean, Malik Neighbors is a fantastic prospect. I had Harrison, Odunze, and Neighbors 1, 2, 3 in this draft class. So, I mean, I'm just kind of splitting hairs or nitpicking a little bit there. Those were the top three. All of them went into the top 10. And if we slide down the draft board, we didn't get another receiver going until 13, if you count Brock Bowers as a receiver. I know he's a tight end, but he's really going to excel in the slot. Kind of unusual that the Raiders would have now drafted Michael Mayer last year and Brock Bowers. But man, you just get a dynamic weapon that you can use on offense. You know, I do like Brock Bowers. He was a phenomenal college tight end, but you really could call him an offensive weapon or a wide receiver if you really wanted to call him that. And then it was Brian Thomas went into the mid-20s. And Brian Thomas went to Jacksonville, and Jacksonville traded down into that spot, pick up Brian Thomas. So you can tell they're going to be moving to more of a vertical offense with Trevor Lawrence. And then you have some receivers taken at the bottom of the round here. You have the Bills trading with their arch nemesis, the Chiefs, and the Chiefs are able to get Xavier Worthy. I wasn't as high on Xavier Worthy as a lot of people, but again, a lot of these prospects, boom or bust, can be the landing spot. And of course, Xavier Worthy, oh great, now we get a Tyreek Hill replacement here with Patrick Mahomes. His comp is who? Hollywood Brown. Signed by the Chiefs this year. So again, the Chiefs do a phenomenal job moving up the draft board, getting the Bills to move back. The Bills moved back, and then they moved out of the first round by one pick. Carolina moves into the first round, and they pick one of my guys in Xavier Legette. I absolutely love this guy. He's a great story. Do some research on him, and you'll find he has a very interesting story, some tragedy in his life. But he persevered. He worked through it, stayed at South Carolina, made the best of the situation, and they couldn't keep him up the field, the end of the season before and then the last year. So really like Xavier Legette. A lot of people say that he may have been overdrafted. I don't necessarily think so. I think end of the first round is a good spot for him. Carolina also gets the extra year in his contract, the 5th-year option. So like that pick. Ricky Pearsall to San Francisco. Does that signal that Ayuk or Debo will be traded? I don't know. And if you are going to trade one of those two players, which is the best option for San Francisco to trade? I would say I would keep Debo. If you look at San Francisco's record without Debo Samuel, not pretty. So that offense and that team misses Debo on the field more than Ayuk, which is why I think that Brandon's probably could be the guy to be traded if they do decide to trade him. I absolutely love Ricky Pearsall. I think he was my number 6 receiver in the class, right behind Ladd McConkey. Phenomenal sticky hands, makes great catches, knows how to run routes. Perfect San Francisco 49er in that offense. Next up, quarterbacks. We had 6 quarterbacks taken in the top 12. That is the most all-time, I believe, and it ties the record for the most quarterbacks ever selected in round 1. So you had Caleb Williams, no surprise, went number 1. Jaden Daniels went as kind of expected, number 2 to Washington. New England made it look like all that talk and chatter before the draft was just a bunch of you-know-what. They didn't even waste no time. They took less than 5 minutes. They made that pick. They knew they wanted Drake May. So he had them going to the New England Patriots. And then the surprise a little bit after that, I'll get to number 8 here in a second. But the surprise really was J.J. McCarthy. All that talk, him going in the top 5 and Minnesota was going to trade up. Well, they didn't have to trade up. Really, they did have to use that extra first round pick they acquired from the Houston Texans. They move up 1 spot. They don't have to move up from their pick at, I think it was 23 that they got from the Houston Texans. They didn't have to use that pick. So they make out very well. They did have to give up a 4th round pick and a 5th round pick next year to move up the 1 spot with the Jets to secure J.J. McCarthy to keep maybe Denver or the Raiders or one another team moving up and selecting their guy. They get J.J. McCarthy. I had him as my number 2 quarterback, but that tier was pretty tight between McCarthy, Daniels, and Drake May. And I think McCarthy goes to a great situation. Williams goes to a great situation. I think Daniels, he has some good receivers there. I'm not the biggest Cliff Kingsbury fan, so we'll see how that works out. Obviously, Drake May goes to a not so favorable situation, which is usually what you see when you're drafting a quarterback in the top 5. Those quarterbacks usually don't go to great situations. In New England, to be frank, is not a great situation. And not surprised at all. Sean Payton takes Bo Nix. I thought if Bo Nix was going to go round 1, the best spot for Bo Nix to succeed in the NFL was to go to Sean Payton in Denver. Seeing all those quarterbacks get drafted in front of him, Bo Nix was never going to make it to the late first or even into the second round. So they take him at number 12. I think that's a good fit. So I think most of the quarterbacks ended up in pretty good fits, except for Michael Penix. WTF. What are you doing, Atlanta? Like at pick 8, you're taking Michael Penix. I use this analogy like this. 1, you just signed Kirk Cousins. It's kind of like you just got married. You've been married for 6 months. You got the big house, the $400,000 mortgage, the white picket fence, but yet you decide, I got this little cute girl at work. She seems really nice, and I'm going to take her out to lunch and just kind of maintain something on the side when you've already committed over here and secured yourself. What in the world was that? If you knew that Michael Penix was going to be your guy and you absolutely loved him, so much so that you would take him number 8 overall, then why didn't you just go sign the Taylor stopgap or the Sam Darnold stopgap or the Jacoby Brissett stopgap receiver that these other teams have done that are going to maybe come in and start for first few weeks? If you loved Michael Penix, why didn't you do that? Why did you sign Kirk Cousins and give him $100 and some million guaranteed and give him a 4-year contract? And then you're going to draft Michael Penix, who's 24 years old, which means if Kirk plays all 4 years and Atlanta does well with Kirk, Penix is going to sit for 4 years and he's not going to start a game or be your number 1 quarterback until year 5, which is the last year of his contract, which you'd have to decide if you're going to pick up that rookie deal. Just mind-blowing to me why you would pick Michael Penix. It has nothing to do with the player himself. He could be a really good quarterback. He has some great tools in his toolbox. He has an unbelievable arm. Right? I could see why a team would really like him. And it's not that he went number 8 overall. Okay, if teams fall in love with players, but it's the team he went to. What are you doing, Atlanta? Just baffles me on roster construction why you take Michael Penix at 8 overall and allocate those resources there and then have huge guarantees with Kirk Cousins. UTF. The more and more I think about this, I know it was shocking last night when you're like, whoa, are you kidding me? I kind of had that same reaction when the Lions took Jahmyr Gibbs last year. I was like, whoa, okay, let's go for a running back at 12. Looks like it worked out, but that was kind of the initial reaction. But the longer this has went on over the last day, the more and more I'm just completely perplexed at what in the world the Atlanta Falcons are doing with the quarterback situation. And it sucks for Michael Penix. He's a guy who needs to play now. If you were going to draft a quarterback to stay behind Kirk Cousins, don't go for the old guy who's ready to play right now. Go draft J.J. McCarthy, who could use maybe a year or 2 of seasoning, sit behind Kirk Cousins, which would be a phenomenal spot for J.J. No. So they went with Michael Penix at number 8 overall, which, man, is one of the most confusing things I've ever seen an organization do in the NFL draft. I know I'm beating a dead horse. Everybody's talking about it, but that is the story of round 1. Seriously, Kirk Cousins got Penixed. There's nothing else to say about that. So hopefully it works out for Fontenot, the Atlanta GM, and he doesn't get fired, but that is a very puzzling pick by the Atlanta Falcons. So with that is my roundup of the first round of last night's 20 NFL draft. And I'm looking forward to tonight's round 2 and round 3. Day 2 of the NFL draft will start at 7 p.m. tonight. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the NFL draft tonight as much as I will. With that, thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. Don't forget, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel and share this video with all your friends and let them know that this podcast is here and we're looking to grow this podcast and get the biggest reach we can. And with that, have a great night. I'm Joshua Klein of the Draft Beard Podcast.
The Draft Beard Podcast.